Chapter 29. Emma. The next morning dawned too early, and Emma rubbed her eyes as she got out of bed, not sure if she had actually slept or not. As Carrie was still sleeping, she tiptoed out of the room quietly. William sat at the dining table, but the rest of the house was still and quiet. "Good morning," he said as she entered the room. His Bible was open on the table, and it was clear he had been doing his devotion. "Can I join you?" Emma asked. "Of course." William looked up at her and smiled. "You never have to ask." Emma sat in the chair and sighed. She had been up most of the night wrestling not only with Jenny being sick, but with a thought that had plagued her. While she didn't want to plant any thoughts in William's mind, she needed to discuss it with someone. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "You look like you're struggling with something." Emma smiled slightly at how well he seemed to understand her, even though they had only known each other a few months. "I was pondering last night. Do you wonder if God is trying to tell us we shouldn't marry?" "Why would you think that?" William pushed the Bible to the side and grabbed her hands. "It's just, first there was the thing with Holden, and now this. I can't get married until Jenny's better, and we have no idea when that might be." "Emma, this is life. Things happen beyond our control, but that's why we put our faith in God. And while God might use signs to keep us from sinning, I can't see any reason why he would be against our marriage. Can you?" Emma shook her head. "No, I simply don't understand. No one else is even sick that we are aware of, so where did Jenny get scarlet fever?" "Is there any chance your father is wrong?" "I suppose it's possible. He didn't let me see her, but from what I remember, the rash is fairly distinctive." "But has there ever been an outbreak here? Has he seen it up close?" "No, the closest one was a few towns over. And now that I think about it, scarlet fever usually starts with a sore throat and a fever. I don't remember Jenny talking about either, though Pa mentioned she had a fever." "Then perhaps there's a chance your father has it wrong." Emma nodded, but her mind was a million miles away. "I need to speak with Benjamin as soon as he gets up." "Why?" "I don't remember Jenny being sick before yesterday. I need to understand exactly what she did so I can look into it more." Emma couldn't stand the idea of sitting and waiting for Benjamin to wake. To pass the time, she busied herself making coffee and breakfast. With every sound of footsteps, Emma turned excitedly, only to face disappointment when Carrie or Samuel entered. Breakfast was ready before Benjamin wandered into the kitchen, and Emma forced herself not to overwhelm Benjamin with questions before he had eaten. When the food disappeared from his plate, though, she turned her attention to him. "Benjamin, can you tell me everything you and Jenny did on your way to school yesterday?" Benjamin's head tilted to the side, and his voice was quiet as he spoke. "Why? Do you think something we did gave her scarlet fever?" "I think it might not be scarlet fever at all. Did Jenny complain of a sore throat or of being too hot in the last few days?" Benjamin pursed his lips and scrunched up his forehead as he tried to remember. Then he shook his head. "Okay, those are two common signs of scarlet fever. So if she didn't have those, she might have something else. Carrie said she vomited and had a rash. So what did you do on the way to school?" Benjamin's eyes fell to his plate as his lower lip folded in. "I told her not to. I was mad she was walking so slowly, so I let her into the fields. I figured she'd just get mad and cry a little, but she didn't. When I didn't hear crying, I went to find her and she was sniffing some flowers. I told her to stop because I wasn't sure if they were good or not. Is it my fault she's sick?" Emma debated her answer. On one hand, she wanted to scold Benjamin for trying to make Jenny cry, but he was probably beating himself up over it already. "No, Benjamin, I don't think it's your fault she's sick. I need to talk to another doctor, but I suspect she might have touched a poisonous plant." His eyes lifted and a light of hope shone in them. "Does that mean she won't die?" Emma smiled and pulled the boy in for a hug. I don't know for sure, but it might not be as serious as we thought. Can you tell me what the plant looked like? Benjamin's face scrunched. They were light blue or white with some blue on them. Thanks, Benjamin. That wasn't much to go on, but perhaps her father would have a book of poisonous plants at the clinic she could bring home and show to Benjamin. She turned her attention to William. Can you saddle up 2 horses? We may be able to telegraph and get the answer we need, but it might require us traveling to another town to speak to a doctor. As William nodded, Emma turned her attention to her sister. Carrie, can you stay with Benjamin until we get back? Of course, Carrie said. Samuel and I will hold down the fort. All right, let's go. William knew better than to argue with Emma when she had a fire shining in her eyes. He didn't know what was in her head, having no medical knowledge himself, but he trusted that she was on to something. He followed her outside and quickly saddled up their horses. Emma led the way into town, pulling her horse to a stop in front of the railway station. Her shoulders back, she marched into the station and to the telegraph office. William followed close behind. Horace, she said in a strong voice, I need to send a telegraph to one of the neighboring doctors. Yes, ma'am. Horace removed the pencil from behind his ear and pulled out a pad of paper. What would you like it to say? What else causes a rash like scarlet fever? Horace's large brown eyes shot up, full of concern. Someone has scarlet fever? It is possible Jenny does. Emma waved her hand in dismissal. But I'm beginning to doubt it. Who's the closest doctor? Let's see. Horace tapped the pencil on the desk. There's a doctor in Lisbon, and one in Belleville, I'm fairly certain. Lisbon will be fine. It's closer. Okay. Horace looked back over the words he had written. Since you have fewer than 10 words, that will be 25 cents. Emma reached for her pocket, but William pulled the money from his own before she could. William, you don't have to pay for this. I might be wrong. It doesn't matter if you are. He handed the money to Horace, who placed it in the till and then turned to the telegraph machine. How long does it take to get an answer? Emma's fingers drummed ever so softly on the countertop. Not long if their telegrapher is working and can reach their doctor. Horace tapped out the code to send the message. Okay, all done. Now we just wait. Great, we'll come back. We need to check my father's clinic. As Emma spun and hurried out of the store, William flashed Horace a shoulder shrug. He did not understand what she needed at her father's clinic, but there was certainly something on her mind. The horses remained tied up outside the stagecoach office, but William saw Emma's figure barreling toward her father's clinic. He jogged to catch up to her. Not that I mind, he said when his stride matched hers, but what are we looking for in your father's clinic? Medical journals. Emma's matter-of-fact tone matched her steps. I spent some time studying them after Joseph died. I remember something about scarlet fever in them. William blinked in confusion. I thought that's what we were telegraphing the doctor for. It is. The doctor should be able to tell me more about scarlet fever, but if I'm right and it is something else, I'll need his knowledge to convince my father. Emma pulled the key for the clinic out of her pocket and opened the door. He may not take my word on it. William followed her into the clinic and watched as she scanned the shelves. Medicines and bandages filled most of them, but one shelf held a row of books. Emma's finger trailed across each one until she landed on the one she wanted. I think this is it. Emma pulled a book from the shelf and took it to the cot. She sat down and opened the book, turning the pages and shaking her head. Yes, here it is. Emma pointed to words triumphantly a few pages later. Scarlet fever presents with a sore throat first and then a fever, but its distinguishing characteristic is a red rash like sandpaper that covers the body. I don't understand. How does that help us?
Carrie said she had a rash, and your pa said she had a fever.
Though he was trying hard, William could not seem to make the connection that Emma had. Yes, but she didn't say it was a rash like sandpaper. Lots of other things can cause rashes. Emma flipped through the pages again.
So you suspect she sniffed a poisonous flower?
The pieces finally fell into place for William.
What about the vomiting and the fever?
I'm not sure about that. Emma bit her lip, sending tiny crinkles across her forehead. Maybe she ate something that didn't agree with her. That could cause vomiting and a fever. It's possible the rash came from a poisonous plant, though. We know poison ivy causes a rash. What if there are other plants that do too? William marveled at Emma. She had displayed little interest in continuing at the clinic, but now William wondered why. She seemed to have a gift. Emma set the book beside her on the cot and then returned to the bookshelf. Her fingers once again scanned the books but didn't choose one. I see nothing else helpful here. She turned to face William. Let's see if Horace has received a reply yet. William nodded and stepped aside, allowing her to exit the clinic first. Her stride back to the stagecoach office was purposeful, and William hurried to keep up with her.
I just received a response,
Horace said as they entered. He waved a piece of paper, and Emma's hands splayed on the counter. What does it say? She asked.
Arriving tonight.
That's wonderful. Emma clapped her hands and smiled. The doctor is coming here. Let's just hope he knows about poisonous plants as well.
Indeed, William said. Horace, will you send the doctor to my homestead when he arrives?
Yes, sir, I'll make sure of it.
Let's check on Pa before we head back. William nodded and mounted his horse as Emma did. Within a few minutes, they were at Doc Moore's place. All was silent and still, but the white towel still gleamed in the window. William hoped Emma was right and Jenny was just reacting to a poison. Though there was still some danger in that, her chances of survival were much greater.